26 and 27. You can ask. So before we get started, we'll go over some of the highlights of the paperwork. And this is an initial assessment, so there'll be a lot of questions because we're gathering a lot of information, and then we'll talk about what you're interested in and what we can connect you with. Okay. So the big thing is confidentiality. There are some limitations to that, so immediate risk of harm to yourself or others, child abuse, elder abuse, court subpoena, things like that.
Yep.
Any questions about any of that?
No.
Also, this is a training center, and I'm a doctoral intern, which just means I'm supervised by a licensed psychologist on staff. All of my interactions with clients are video recorded, and the only person has access to that is my supervisor. Any questions about any of that? No. So then tell me a little bit about what brought you in today.
Mostly my alcohol and drug abuse. It's been going on for years. For a long time I didn't think it was a problem. It became a problem. And I thought it was just a problem with myself. But very recently my wife told me she wanted to separate a few days ago. And I've convinced her to stay, but I clearly need help.
So I just have some additional questions just to get a good sense of the problem that you said years. And I wondered when you first noticed, when you first started using.
So I think the first time I really abused anything, it's more than just alcohol. I had a pretty severe accident on my 19th birthday. And for like 2.5, 3 months after that, I had a continuous supply of Vicodin.
Mm-hmm.
And I most definitely needed it for the pain, so it was totally legitimate for me to have it, but I also abused it. For instance, days I didn't have pain, I would just sit up and use it instead. That was the first time.
And then alcohol you mentioned as well?
Yeah, that's probably the biggest one, just because it's the most consistent. I don't remember the first time I drank. It really wasn't a problem, though, until I turned 21 or something, undergrad. Ever since then, I've started and stopped a few times, typical things. My wife really doesn't like my drinking. I don't become violent or anything like that. It's just more, it controls my life. I gets in the way of everything I want to do. Very recently, I've been pretty bad, and I told her I was going to stop, and I have, but... Yeah.
So how long have you stopped?
I haven't drank in...
That's great.
Yeah, the thing is, though, when I stopped drinking, I was just starting other girls. So it's not really... I mean, it's a weird thing where it feels like progress, but it probably isn't. But I just do something else.
And this, I mean, that insight is really helpful to have. Because a lot of things we talk about people with when they first start moderating substance is to look for, like, compensation in different areas.
Yeah. I definitely do that.
And so what other substances?
Anything to get my hands on. Nothing legal, though. So, I haven't told her this. I see a psychiatrist here.
Okay.
And I'm prescribing antidepressants and also Ambien because I do have trouble sleeping. Sometimes I use that. And I don't really even enjoy it, I just kind of do it just because. So that's a big one, especially that I get it from a psychiatrist. That's pretty shitty. I recently read up on dextromethorphan. Do you know what that is? Its main ingredient in cough syrup. It's a hallucinogen.
Oh.
And it turns out it's a pretty serious drug. And it was interesting to me, so I tried it a few times. I obviously didn't like that. But I've used it for a week or two. Also, apparently, Benadryl is also a serious drug. I had a while. And then Vicodin, but I think it's very often. So, working else and stuff. So that's about it, though. Thanks. Basically whatever I can get my hands on. I'm not really willing to get illegal drugs, thankfully.
So no, like marijuana, no.
No, I did marijuana a long time ago in the past, but there was like a summer when I was off from college. I did it a lot that summer, but then I moved and I stopped. Haven't been since. I obviously really enjoy it because it's great, but I would probably use it if I started. So.
And what are the distinctions between use and abuse for you? It's like, when do you notice when you're using a substance that it's not becoming abused?
So drinking is probably a good example of this, where I just kind of started. First night or two, it's fine, but I typically don't stop. Whenever I drink, it's a lot, and I personally don't mind that, because I think if I'm going to drink, I should drink whatever I want. It's already bad for me, so I don't care. But it's more that when I drink, I do it 3-4 nights in a row, or as often as I can, until my body can't handle it, and I start to feel low. And that process repeats.
And then what is your typical like drink of choice? What do you usually get?
In the past, often when it starts out, I would stick with beer because it's much easier to moderate how much you drink.
Mm-hmm.
But that always progresses into, as I get further into drinking, not in a single night, but a bunch of nights, I would progress to hard liquor. Specifically rum, because it's the cheapest that I can tolerate. So, drinking it. So I would like to care about taste, but money says no. So I don't.
And then, when you do drink, about how many like drink equivalents would you estimate? Like 30 or 40?
Yeah, I calculated this once. A bottle of liquor is like, it's about 500-600 milliliters of liquor. So 35% alcohol per volume, so I don't know, it's 20-30, I'm guessing.
I think like a bottle of liquor is like 21 shots or something?
Yeah, so I'm guessing 15-20. When I drink beer, it's less. I'm sure there's some physical reason for this, but you don't need as much, maybe because you drink it over a long period of time. I don't know.
There's also like a small food content in beer too.
There's
like the hops or the barley, so that helps with absorption, I think it is.
Yeah, so I've definitely noticed that many times I need less beer per alcohol content. So I can easily go through a full bottle of liquor if I really wanted to.
Do you know about like a span of time where you go through a bottle of liquor?
8 hours.
About how often, if you were to guess, like percentage-wise, do you black out with drinking?
Once ever.
Hmm?
Only once ever.
Once
So,
ever.
Yep.
That's a little bit surprising when I think about, is it like a blacking out happens at about like a 0.2 blood alcohol content. And I would think 15 to 20 drinks in the span of 8 hours that you'd hit that or be above that.
I am surprised as well, but it's only been once ever.
Do you remember when that was?
Just a year ago. It was my one and only time drinking tequila. I'm well aware that there's no difference in alcohol, but I don't know, it's just related to me. So.
When you drink, do you ever use other substances as well?
No. Back when I did marijuana for that summer a few times, but I would officially say no.
Okay.
Especially because all the drugs I listed had like horrible interactions with it, so.
Yes. That was my concern.
I would probably die, so.
Yes, I would definitely recommend not using the substances.
No, I never have, and I don't think I ever will. They don't really match my moods anyway, so that's not a concern.
So you mentioned moods, and I wonder if you've noticed a connection with mood and different substances, or you're like pulled in different directions, depending.
Not really. It's more that I'll find an excuse to do it no matter what. I'm in a good mood, I mean, drinking's great. I'm in a bad mood, it'll probably make it a little better. Sometimes it makes it worse, and that really sucks, but sometimes it makes it better. So it's not a specific mood, it's more that any mood I can find an excuse for.
We asked because there can sometimes be some pretty complex interactions with mood. If you think about alcohol being a depressant, when you drink and you become more of the depressed mood, and then as your body withdraws from that, there's almost a stimulant effect. And sometimes people can get shaky and feel more anxious.
I have definitely experienced the anxiety thing. The shakiness, probably not.
Okay.
Not like ADTs or anything, definitely not like that. So, I don't think I've ever significantly ventured from alcohol. I just don't think so.
And we ask about any like consequences or things you've noticed. It sounds like your relationship with your wife.
That's definitely one thing.
How has that impacted, or what have those conversations been like?
She doesn't like drug use at all,
Mm-hmm.
and I do it. It's essentially the only true strain in our relationship right now. She doesn't like how I am on the drugs, especially alcohol, would be the main one.
And how would she say you are, and what is different?
Belligerent, sometimes. I think her main complaints, so there are a couple. One, the main complaint would be that I'm very sensitive, kind of as in like something will get me into a bad mood. I'll be in a bad mood the entire night, and I'm very unpleasant to be around when I'm like that. I don't get violence. I'm not really an angry person at all. I don't really have a temper at all. It's just I'm in a horrible mood. It sucks for her. It's also the fact that I've tried to stop many, many times, and I start back up thinking it's going to be okay, hoping it's going to be okay, and I don't. And I think she's just sick of it. So.
And about how many times do you think that's happened? You were to get an estimate. 5 times.
Something like that.
About how long are you able to last before, like,
That varies considerably.
I'm trying to think also, has there been any period of abstinence from any substance, all substances, or does it always switch?
Yeah. After my first time quitting alcohol, I severely abused it for like a month and a half and started to have some really serious physical problems. And
Which has, do you remember?
yeah, I went to the hospital a couple times. It was probably anxiety and severe dehydration type things where I just did so much alcohol in such a short period of time, my body was dehydrated, and even though I was drinking water, it just wouldn't rehydrate. And the main symptom was that my heart started racing 110, 120 beats per minute continuously, no matter what I was doing. And I went to the hospital a few times for it, see doctors, having anxiety attacks and stuff. They didn't know what's wrong with me, so it just eventually stopped after I stopped drinking alcohol, like a couple months after. So it was a while that this happened.
I think of that stimulant effect of
Yeah.
withdrawing from alcohol.
That didn't affect me.
So are those the 2 to 3 hospitalizations you mentioned in the paperwork?
Yeah.
And when was the most recent time that happened?
Early 2011, something like that. It's not that I don't feel like that anymore when I stopped, it's just that I know what it is now. And I know that all going to the ER is a waste of money, so it's just... And since it's so anxiety driven, since I know what it is, there isn't as much anxiety with it. And I know that just like drinking ridiculous amounts of water will help as well. So it's not that it's not a problem anymore, it's just that I know how to deal with it more.
And then, have there been any like patterns that you've identified in your like reasons for trying to moderate use? You say like the 5 times.
Yeah, definitely. I'm very into fitness, and it's something that's been part of my life for a very long time. Alcohol really gets in the way of that. So when I start drinking, I will gain weight for obvious reasons, and I will eventually be like, hey, I need to lose weight again. And there's always a massive struggle between stopping and not stopping, because I really want to stop and get back on track nutritionally, fitness-wise. So most of the time, the reason that I stop is that. And when I start back up again, it's a couple times have been because I try and do it in moderation, even when I'm losing weight, which is not that good for you, but technically possible calorie-wise. But usually because I've lost enough weight and I'm confident in how much I'm getting. So.
You mentioned antidepressants, and so I'm curious about your experience of use with depression or anxiety or both. When you first noticed that?
I have probably had some form of depression ever since I was a teenager, but I didn't seek help or fully realize that I should be getting help until like 2 years ago. And I went and saw a psychiatrist here, took an antidepressant, and it seemed to help. But, you know, I kind of relapse would be the word, switching to different antidepressants, sleeping medication. That's it.
So symptoms, I'm curious about different types of thoughts you have, different content of thoughts. Sometimes people experience like feelings of guilt, hopelessness, low self-esteem, lethargy.
All of those. It's so lately it's been like guilt, helplessness would be the 2 main ones. So when I graduated high school, I had such a low GPA I barely graduated, couldn't get into college. And from there, went to tech school, did well there, went to my hometown university, did very well there, transferred into a top tier undergrad and graduated. And now I'm here in literally the best program in the country for what I'm doing.
I was about to say.
But since I got here, it's been getting in my way so much that instead of getting a PhD, I'm getting a master's. So I feel like I failed for the first time in my life at something. And not everyone's going to take that stance on what happened, but I do. So there's that.
What was that process like? Was that a decision you had made, your advisor made, the program made?
Me, my advisor, and my wife all together, I suppose. I've been feeling denial would be the best word for it, not knowing what to do in grad school for a while. So I just wasn't performing well at all, just because I wasn't doing anything. So I just mental block of some kind. My advisor noticed because, you know, I wasn't doing work, of course. I noticed because the same reason. So she talked to me a couple times. That's initially why I got help, but although some things changed, it didn't change nearly enough. So I decided enough was enough. I've wasted my time here. So my wife and I decided on my advisor for this one. So that was about a year ago.
Okay. And so what does your trajectory look like? Are you anticipating graduating next year or this year?
In
May.
Yes. There's a small chance I'll graduate at the end of the summer. If you know, I can get a job or whatever, but I'm not too concerned about that as long as I actually start looking.
And you mentioned feeling like this was like a failure, you mentioned. I wonder if you could describe that a little bit.
Whenever I've tried something in my life, whatever it is, I've always succeeded.
Mm.
And I did very, very well in undergrad when I tried there in math and physics. And when I got here, I did well my first year, but then things started falling apart due to a lot of things, I guess. And
There are a lot of things.
just alcohol, losing my passion in what I was researching, probably that kind of stuff combined with the fact that the supervision over me was almost none. I was kind of on my own.
Mm-hmm. It's really hard.
Yeah, so instead of doing anything, I just did nothing. And I was able to get away with it for a very long time. And it just snowballed out of control to the point where I basically couldn't function. And some people would say that just like graduating with a master's and stuff is an accomplishment, and I acknowledge that, but that's not why I was here. And I tried as hard as I could to get a PhD, and although I wasn't working, I tried as hard as I could to start working, and I just couldn't. And I consider that a very major failure.
I guess I'm curious about so many things, because one of the things when I think about depression is a lot of the things that sounds like losing passion, not feeling motivated, really difficult getting started. And so a lot of those things just feel so health related. And I mean, we use this a lot, like running a marathon. Even if you've like trained really well, you're really capable of it. If you break your ankle, like you're not going to be able to run to the extent that you could.
Yeah.
And so I guess I'm curious about all of these different things, what it would be like if we could get some of the depressive symptomatology under control, if a lot of those like passion and things would return.
Yeah.
And so I mean, I guess I'm just so curious about that, as opposed to this sense of failure, as the sense of just how can we get these things under control so that you can get back to the level that you were performing at the first year.
That's what I would like. So, I mean, I think I can. I mean, it's probably all depression related, alcohol related, because it makes it worse.
Yeah, there's a big connection with those.
Yeah, and I mean, when I first started here in undergrad and all that kind of stuff, I wasn't seeking help or anything. So maybe if I would have earlier, this wouldn't even happen, but it's kind of irrelevant at this point. So.
And I always think about like showing kindness to the people we were in the past, because we can often look back and be like, oh, if only I'd done this earlier.
Yeah.
And I look at it as like, you're doing it now, and a lot of people wouldn't even be doing it now.
Yeah.
So it's a strength to recognize that. And so you mentioned sleep also, and I wonder if that's connection with depression. Are you sleeping more? Are you sleeping less?
It is probably related to the fact that when I'm depressed, I take a lot of naps.
Mm.
And take a nap in the afternoon, suddenly I can't sleep at night, and it spirals out of control to the point where my sleep schedule is completely screwed up. Also, alcohol doesn't help with that. All the drugs that I mentioned I've used don't help with that. Benadryl is a sleep aid.
Mm-hmm.
Dextromethorphan is often mixed with sleep aids. Ambien is like the most sleep aid you can get. So, for instance, when I use Ambien, after I stop doing it, there's a few periods where I just can't sleep at all.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, so my sleep problems are almost assuredly related to the drug problems. Yeah, probably a little depression on the drugs.
And we'll see that sort of is like coming full circle too,
Yes,
because the depression increases, the drug use increases, the
definitely
hypersomnia or insomnia. If you were to like estimate how many hours of restful sleep you get a day.
Well, so after I've used something, it can vary anywhere between like 2 and 5.
Mm-hmm.
If I'm lucky, 5. If I'm unlucky, 2, 3. I'm fully capable of getting 7 to 8 hours of sleep, and I can function just fine on it. But when I'm using drugs, it's not even close to that.
Mm-hmm. And so presently, where do you think?
Presently, I just recently stopped using everything. 4 at the most. I'm very tired. I've been trying to sleep in the early morning, afternoon after my wife leaves for work, and I'm usually able to get like an extra hour there, but I didn't do it today because I want to try and get back to sleep schedule.
You mentioned you've presently stopped using everything. And so about how long has it been since you stopped using everything? A week. What has that week been like?
Not because of the drugs, but in general, it's just been horrible. My wife told me she wanted to separate from me Sunday night, so this is pretty recent.
Yeah, it was 3 days ago, 2 days ago.
So,
when I think about like urges to use, since when you're doing horrible, it can increase that. So I wonder if there have been times where it's been really difficult not to use, or how you've navigated those.
lately I don't want to do anything at all.
Okay.
I don't know if that urge will come back. I am assuming it will at some point, because this isn't the first time I haven't wanted to do anything. One of the big things I have to do is convince my wife that I don't want to do anything right now.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not just lying about it, because this has happened before. Not the lying, but cycling through this so many times.
Mm-hmm.
There's a difference that I'm doing this for her and myself instead of just myself.
Mm-hmm.
It's what I have to consider.
And so I think it's, really commendable, first of all, that you almost made it a week. I mean, one of the first things that we talk about is seeing if you can go a week. When you talk about substances or feeling that you're being dependent on them or using them a lot or abusing them, we usually do like what is it called? Like a try, don't die. So just like try the week to see if you can, like when is the most easy not to use, when is it more difficult to sort of identify some of the triggers for use. So yeah, just like being really proud of that, in spite of it being really like horrible time, because there's that silver lining of. And have you noticed, well, I guess this is hard too with the horrible week, but any changes in like overall mood or homeostasis of mood?
No, I've just had a horrible week. Especially since I'm not sleeping.
Mm-hmm. And that might be something just to be curious about moving forward. Because we also talk about like trying to separate out what is substance induced versus what is coming primarily from the depression. And so that's really hard to do if you're currently using substances. So I think it's great that you're not presently, so that you can start taking a look at that and being mindful of this is a difficult week in general. So not to base all of your assumptions on that, but just to watch it moving forward. So then to transition a bit into your like supportive relationships, family background, friends, people that are really in support of like moderating versus friends that might be more triggering. I just asked you like 6 questions in one, so
I
you can take
kind
a
of answer them
direction.
all at once.
Okay.
The only person I really interact with outside of working is my wife. And when I drink, it's always, I don't go to bars, I don't have friends. Over the course of grad school, it's kind of a personal choice, I guess. I could have had friends if I wanted to. I just didn't feel like it. So my wife was enough for me. So it's all internal.
And so you don't have interactions with like siblings. I wonder about family history of substance use.
My mother was an alcoholic growing up.
Mm-hmm.
I don't talk to my brother or sister that much, or my dad. I know my dad hasn't abused substances. I have heard through my parents that my brother was an alcoholic in college, but he got it under control. And I know my sister, when she was in college, she dropped out after a year. I know she used drugs heavily then, but I don't know the reason. So I can't really think too much about that, but I do know my brother and mom both substance abuse.
And then you mentioned no friends in the area. I wonder if, like where is home? Do you have friends from undergrad or?
Yeah, some. I had a few really, really good friends growing up, and I stayed in contact with them for a while, but we don't live close to each other anymore. Just kind of fell out of contact. And I met my wife very early in undergrad, and this entire time we've been enough for each other. So I haven't felt the desire to make new friends at all. I would have if I was single this entire time, but I wasn't. So I don't have any friends. I can make them if I really wanted to, but I have no desire to. I'm kind of getting old to go into that kind of parties and stuff anyway, so
So when you say like your wife's been enough for you, I wonder how you would describe your relationship, both in the past and presently.
I would say mostly excellent. It's so when I was going through the whole thing, freaking out about grad school and stuff, I had some stupid thoughts. I never really acted on anything.
What are stupid thoughts?
Well, I wanted to change something major in my life, so I wanted to separate from her. It never got to the point where it's at now. The situation's reversed. It never got to this point, but we did see a marriage counselor, and that helped a lot. I just realized how unbelievably stupid I was being. And
I feel like stupid is one of those really shame-based words.
it is, but the marriage counselor said we had the best marriage she's ever seen. So there's kind of a basis for that. Literally the only point of contention between us is substance abuse on my part. So, yeah, and she said she's been struggling with this for a few months. Up until Sunday, I had no idea. I was pretty blindsided by this.
What was that conversation like? I mean, you mentioned that, right now you're staying together, you convinced her to stay, but what was that conversation like?
I had felt it over the past few days before that, because as far as I know, this is a complete coincidence, but she wanted to open the relationship around a week and a half ago. Started dating this guy. I was actually okay with this, for unrelated reasons, and I think it was just a coincidence that all this happened. I believe her when she told me that. But a few days before this happened, I felt her separating from me, getting distance in ways. And for a while, I just was anxious about the open relationship thing. I never acted on it. It was just this one thing with this guy. And I thought it was maybe because of that or something, but then when I woke up in the morning, she just told me she wants to separate. And she didn't really talk much. She talks a lot more. I just wanted to know why and all that kind of stuff.
And so you mentioned prior marriage counseling.
Yeah.
Have you ever sought individual counseling before?
Yeah, but with a psychiatrist.
With a psychiatrist?
Yeah. I don't know. It's not really counseling, I guess. It's more of a medication thing. But other than that, no.
Mm-hmm. And how long ago was the marriage counselor experience?
About a year ago.
And were there things that you found particularly helpful about that experience? Things you could have done without?
It just made me realize what I was thinking is wrong. That's really the main thing it did. Made me realize that I was going to try and throw away something that I shouldn't try and throw away. And as soon as I realized that, I stopped having any kind of feeling like that whatsoever, and started focusing on graduating with a master's degree instead. I don't have shortly after the master's. I changed to something else.
And we also asked if you've ever been hospitalized for anything like psychologically related.
Not unless you count the whole drug withdrawal, alcohol withdrawal, like anxiety, panic attack issues. I would personally consider those psychological, but at the time I didn't know.
Mm-hmm. Also, in your paperwork, you mentioned considering suicide 2 or 3 times in the past month.
Yeah, it's very recent.
And so what does that look like?
I really don't feel like I want to live without her. That's all just it. I have no idea.
So have the thoughts of suicide just started since Sunday?
Yeah, I had a couple suicidal thoughts a long time ago, a year or 2 ago, when I was going through the whole PhD thing.
Mm-hmm.
That's about it.
And so when you have the thoughts about not wanting to live without her, about how far along that path do you get? And like, do you start considering plans? Will you do it?
No, definitely not. It's just a general thing.
So would you say you have like an intent to die, or would there be the intent to like get away from the pain? Or like, how would you categorize that?
I don't want to live anymore. That would be, I don't know how else to describe it. It's not pain related, it's not anything, it's just I don't see it'd be worthwhile anymore.
You also mentioned self-injury.
Once. I wanted to be completely honest on the form.
So we always appreciate honesty.
Yeah. So you know how in movies when people need to drop blood or something, they each knife go like this around their hand, and that just seemed like the stupidest thing ever to me because it's just like make a small cut because you need like a drop of blood. So I got into the idea that I wanted to see how hard it was to cut myself. So I took a safety razor and cut my leg a few times just to see. Turns out it's actually really hard to do. So I don't know if I would classify this. Again, I wanted to be honest. So
was the intent to hurt yourself, or was it almost like a curiosity side?
I think it was more of a curiosity thing. It did hurt, but
I would imagine so.
It's a little more relaxed on what to do.
And about how long ago was that?
6 months, maybe something like that. Wasn't too, not super recent either.
You also mentioned thoughts of hurting others, thoughts of harming others.
Yeah. Same thing I didn't want to mention is this. This is probably related to my drinking. Not hurting her. Definitely not. So, I've always been interested in the bad guys and stuff more than the good guys, just because that's what's more interesting to me. And a few months ago, I happened upon just a huge forum about serial killers, and it was very interesting to me. So So, and when I was looking into that, it just fascinated me, these people. And one in particular fascinated me, Ted Bundy, because he was literally the worst person I've ever heard of.
Like the medical doctor that killed college students?
No, he was a law school student who killed like 35, 40 people, necrophilia. He's known for just being really attractive and just luring people, just the way he talks. He's definitely like pure evil. And I was fascinated by that. Just getting into more complicated things. It's when this one come up. So part of the thing about getting a PhD in physics is I always considered it one of the hardest things to do academically. I realize now that pretty much any academic thing is difficult, if you take it that far. But especially when I started, it's like physics is hard, math is hard, so I did those. But as time progressed, I realized although I am smart, and I have proven that more than once, I'm probably not a genius. And I eventually met people that were legitimate geniuses that just didn't got the work. So I realized I was never going to be great at physics. And this happened a few times with other things as well. And when I started looking into these people, how horrible they were, I just got some stupid idea in my head about it. And I really don't know what I was thinking. And one drunken night, I told my wife about it, and apparently it terrified her. I understand why. So when I said there was only one point of contention in our relationship, there's two. And
I'm curious about what the thoughts were. Like, how far do you imagine yourself doing something similar? Or
I want to first point out that I'm done with these thoughts. Otherwise, I wouldn't be talking about them. It's foolish. I was pretty far along, and I'll never tell her this. I think I know how to do it, but just need planning it. Just because you read so much about these people, it's a certain kind of snurrish, negative, that kind of stuff. It was pretty fun when I realized how not worth it was, just how horrible it was, and all that kind of stuff. These thoughts mostly came from my drinking. And that's when it first started. That's when I told her about it and all that kind of stuff. This was the strongest one that came out. It's very cool.
So about how long was that, if you were to ballpark?
A couple months. It wasn't that long. This is what prompted her to kind of an ultimatum on me to stop drinking, I'm guessing. And I fully supported it for obvious reasons. That's not who I want to be. That's not who I am. It's very good.
I'm also curious, when you say really far along, was it thoughts, plans? Did you ever purchase anything related to the plans?
Yes.
About all of the things?
No.
Or all
a few things. So I just bought a couple lots of them. So there's nothing major. What was the question? Sorry.
How far along you got? You got following people, or ever getting in physical altercations, or identifying specific people?
Not specific people. There's probably a type I would have went for. Not really though. I think it's more about the situation than the specific type of people, I think. as I said, I knew how to do it. Actually, it's hard. You just have to want to do it. As long as you can. I never followed anyone, ever. Never got that far. I don't know how long it would have taken me to get that far.
So what helped you to stop?
I realized it wasn't even close to worth it, and it was just very weird, and I don't know why I was even thinking in the first place. Like, I know I can't diagnose myself with this, but I don't think I'm a psychopath or sociopath. I have empathy towards some people, at least, and this kind of stuff. So the risks, as I said, I know how to do it. It's not that hard, but modern technology, it's. I mean, so you have to do it 3 times to classify as a serial killer in the first place. You can do it 3 times, but if you don't, like, what am I? And that was one of the things. The other thing is, like, prison. I would not last in prison. I know what it's like, not personally, but I looked into it just to see. I don't want to live with the guilt. I knew it was, even going through this stuff, I knew it was probably temporary. And, I mean, I knew that eventually I wouldn't want to do it anymore. But this doesn't work like that. Very recent example, 2 days ago, one of the most prolific serial killers in American history, called the original Night Stalker. He did a bunch of stuff in the early 70s, and they just reopened this case 2 days ago. You heard about that?
I haven't heard about it, but I know that those things, the cold cases, often open.
Right away I didn't think of that at all, but it's just, this isn't who I want to be, and the biggest issue, at least thinking selfishly, is that if you do it even once, or even just as much as I have, you can't get away from it. And it's not going to be. It's not going to be. So I could go on for like 10 hours on the podcast. So.
Well, thank you for sharing this with me too, because these can be really difficult things to talk about.
I was afraid for a long time and didn't think I was going to bring it up just because I know what people must think. And I'm well aware that it's dangerous. And I am at least sort of thinking of the thought that if I actually still had these thoughts, it would be the worst idea ever to tell someone. So that was my reasoning on why I can actually bring this up to people.
I think similar in the thread of like what helped you to stop. I'm curious about with thoughts of suicide. What are some things that help you not do that? So things like protective factors.
Against this or suicide?
Suicide. You've identified a lot of protective factors against harming others.
Just, it's all focused with my wife. Just don't live without her. So to separate is going to be very difficult for me. I like to think I'm a pretty rational person, so I know that a lot of people have thoughts like this, and I know that eventually things move on, and I might. But I do not see a path from where I am to there. Separate. And I know that maybe it will appear one day, but I don't know if I want to go through that. So I don't know if there's a true protective factor. Because if I want to kill myself, I will do it. It's not going to be like standing on a bridge waiting for people to come and look at me. It's not something I will mess around with. There are ways you can do it where nothing can prevent it. So, yeah, it's further factors are none.
curious about if you're aware of different resources we have, either on campus or nationally for, because what suicide is a really impulsive thing, right?
Yeah.
So like what you mentioned, in those moments where you don't see any other options, there's, I think, a span of like 15 seconds before people make that decision. And so one of the things we talk about is knowing about different resources and reaching out to any of those in those moments.
I'm aware they exist, but I don't know any person. So, yeah. Part of the issue is I know the guaranteed ways of suicide are kind of find out things. So, one of them is inhalation by nitrogen. I think that's the. There's a gaseous substance you just inhale it to sleep at night. Because your lungs can't tell the difference between it and the air. So you just breathe it in and suffocate, and you're supposed to pains. So I think it's not
Actually, I didn't know that. Seems like you've done some research.
I didn't. I just knew about this before. It's just something I came across. I haven't done any research into it. I just know about it.
Okay.
Yeah, it's one of the molecules in here. I don't know which. I think it's nitrogen. You just inhale it.
So some of the emergency centers, you can walk into the center anytime during business hours. So if you really feel overwhelmed, you just need somebody to talk to. It's called an emergency walk-in. There's also McKinley. You can walk into any ER, so not only for like physical health, there's also psychological assistance there. There are also a lot of hotlines. So in the middle of the night, if you wake up, I think especially with like insomnia, things like that, just having somebody to talk to in those moments can be really helpful. So we have this, which you can take and go through these things. What are your thoughts on those? Do you think those would be things that you'd be able to utilize?
Yeah, I can call. Yeah, I could do that.
Okay.
So.
I'm also interested in what sort of treatment you were interested in when you came in. My favorite question of the day is like, what are you hoping to have when you came in today?
My psychiatrist a while ago now gave me the number of bouts, so I don't really talk to her about much. She knows I've had substance abuse. The only thing I've talked to her about is alcohol.
Mm-hmm.
She obviously doesn't know I abused the ambient. So she gave me the number of this place for the alcohol and drug abuse.
Yes.
And that's how I found out about it.
Mm-hmm.
And I've been putting it off because everything's just focused on me. But now that my wife is also very involved with this, I decided to find a call. So I don't think I really have any true expectations. I just knew that this was a step I should take.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's a good idea. So one of the things we can set you up with is called an AOD assessment. So you get connected with one of our like specialized AOD counselors,
Okay.
And then they meet with you twice and then make recommendations on different treatment. One of the things that I think about is called Discovery Group. So it's a group of people that come together. It's facilitated by 2 licensed psychologists, and then they like provide support for each other. A lot of people are dealing with both substance and process addictions, and that's something that you can like stay in for the entire time. I think people have been in there, I think, upwards of like 5-6 years, so this can be really helpful. They can also make community referrals and help facilitate things. I know graduation is coming up pretty soon, so getting connected to services wherever you end up would be really helpful too. So how do you feel about that?
I could try. I don't really try anything. So.
Great. So what we can do is we can schedule an AOD assessment. And then they can make, I think, more informed AOD assessment than I could provide. One of the things I was also wondering if you'd be okay with is if we consulted with one of the staff just about risk. Like I said, I'm an intern, so one of the things that people endorse, like thoughts of suicide, especially recent ones, they want us to consult.
That's fine.
Is that okay?
I don't mind.
Okay. So let me see if I can get someone to come in with us. think that can be helpful too, because I think like connecting with services and both knowing resources. It sounds like your wife's supportive, and that's good. But I think what just concerns me is like the reason for living being hurt, and if something does happen or if something goes wrong with that, I just want to make sure we have an idea of what we can do to keep you safe. So they should be getting someone shortly. Are there other things that you think would be helpful to talk about, or questions you wish to ask?
That's pretty much it.
Okay.
It's yeah, that's actually everything, I think.
I'm trying to think about things. I think I would definitely recommend continuing with the moderation plan.
Yeah.
I think like a month not using alcohol, and then a week not using any of the substances, I think is really great. One of the things I consider is be mindful of different like compensation behaviors or compensatory behaviors, especially since you knew before the substances, like other medications, were those compensatory behaviors before. I'd be on the lookout for what might be coming up too. That might be things like internet usage, relying on like video games or different types of like escapism. I always think from like a harm reduction approach. So like if that keeps you safe, if that improves your relationship, like pick and choose with those things, but just be mindful of them and how they might impact. Are there any things that you imagine?
I have been addicted to video games in the past for sure, so I would need to watch out for that for sure.
In particular types of video games?
And so I play them a lot. So it's I don't consider it a problem, but sometimes I guess it is. And yeah, it's happened before. I get addicted to one and just won't do it. So that could happen. Sure.
So yeah, be mindful of that. And I think about like moderation with that. So if there's something you can feel like you can control in, like is playing for an hour enough, too much? Being mindful of how you can moderate that or stay on top of that. And then be curious about compensatory behaviors after that.
Yeah.
I'm curious also about like different times, or like what support you might want from your wife. What could she do to help be a part of this process?
Just spend time with me. That's what I want. So, in the past 2 days, we've actually spent some time together where we're actually talking about it, and I know we both had a good time. And I want to keep doing that. If she wants to support me, that's how she does it.
Okay, great. Sometimes in these situations, I encourage like really specific things because sometimes like you can ask for help or support, but then what you mean is entirely different than what the other person means. So I look into like spending time. So like on Tuesday, could we do this specific thing together that we both enjoy? Sometimes even planning that for when you know that you might be at a higher risk for substance use, or planning those things can be really helpful. So it's like, how do we help others help us, really specifically?
I will definitely tell her about that. I think she finds it interesting.
Great.
She'll like that, I think.
I also think about things to help out with the sleep, because everything can get more difficult with limited sleep. I'm trying to think. Do you have a smartphone?
I do.
There's a free app called Stop, Breathe, Think, and Insight Timer. And what both of those do is you type in your mood, which is helpful because then you have like a mood tracker that you're sort of going through in the days. And then you can put in how much time you have, and then it suggests different types of like deep breathing, grounding exercises. And these are really helpful for behavioral interventions for especially anxiety and depression. Because what anxiety does is it either pulls you into the future or it sticks you in the past, and you lose sight of the present moment. and then it can feel very dangerous to your body. So it's when you get like the pumps of adrenaline and fast breathing, shallow breathing, things like that. And particularly for sleep, there's one called a body scan. And a lot of people fall asleep while they're doing that, so they don't even really make it through the body scan. And like anything, it's a skill. So we always encourage people, like the first time you try some of these, you're like figuring out what works well for you and what doesn't work as well. So yeah, so like if one doesn't work, then you try others and get a sense of what does help. Just kind of like give you all of these crystals I can think of, so you can start practicing them. I think I'd like a sleep hygiene. Have you heard of that?
No.
So it's a way of helping to like reset your circadian rhythm, and so it like changes your relationship with sleep. So different things you can go through. Exercise can be really helpful, so being mindful of that, especially being into fitness already, that can be really helpful. I'd also encourage continuing exercising because there's a good connection between that and mood. I don't know why. I wonder if Kurt's available. He's our like AOD specialist. I might have to hunt somebody now. So would you mind hanging out in the lobby for just like a couple minutes?
I can do it.
Any other questions you have for me before?
No.
Okay. Hunt somebody. It should only take like a couple minutes.